Hi, Zach Dobson here with another Friday photo tip. This week and next, I want to talk to you about one of my specialties, shooting in low light without flash. I'm going to go ahead and say that there isn't anyone who can do this better than I can, and over the last dozen years, I've developed my own techniques and practices to get true-to-life colors and tones, capturing the ambiance of scenes as they appear and leaving subjects undisturbed by strobes. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll give some tips for camera settings and techniques that will help you get significantly better photos when light is scarce. A heads up, most of these techniques require a DSLR or mirrorless camera, something with manual controls. After this tip, check the link in my bio to download a free low-light shooting guide with additional tips and editing techniques. This week I focus on camera settings. Next week I'll discuss techniques and best practices. First up is shutter speed. To keep this quick and simple, you just need to know that the lower the number, the more light you let in. 1/30th of a second lets in twice the amount of light as 1/60th of a second. An important note is that once you start moving lower than about 1/30th of a second, you increasingly run the risk of blurry photos, either from the movement of your subject or the subtle movement of your hands holding the camera. At low shutter speeds, you need to take extra steps to stabilize yourself. More on those next week. Next is aperture. The lower the number, the more light you let in. If you're not sure what the minimum aperture is on your lens, check the front of it. f1.4 or 2.0 are best for low light shooting. f2.8 is about the best you'll find in a zoom lens. If your zoom lens has an aperture range marked on it, for example, 3.5 to 5.6, you have to set the lens at the widest angle to get the lowest aperture value. ISO is the sensitivity of the sensor. The lower the number, the better the image quality. However, low numbers mean low sensitivity, so that doesn't work in low light situations. You need to use the higher ISOs in your camera. But as the numbers get much higher, the image quality can start to drastically decrease. The photos may appear slightly out of focus or start to get a grainy, pixelated quality to them. High ISO quality is closely tied to the quality of your camera. Pretty much all modern cameras will give you a good photo at ISO 800. Most will do a decent job at 1600. 3200 can get dicey on a cheaper camera, but might be okay to use. You just have to test it out and see for yourself. On my mirrorless camera, I feel okay with 6400, but it's not ideal. I wouldn't shoot advertising work at that ISO, but I would shoot personal work. So once you get a feel for each of these aspects of the camera, then you start to learn how to set your priorities. If I know I'm about to shoot a dark scene, I'll set the camera right away to the settings I know I'm very comfortable with. For example, aperture I'll set to the widest based on what lens I'm using, so f1.4 or 2.0. The shutter speed I like to set to 1/15th to start because I'm comfortable hand-holding or bracing at that speed. 1600 on my camera for the ISO yields a good quality image, so I'll start there. Finding these settings for yourself will take some trial and error. If I'm still not within one stop of the ideal exposure with these initial settings, I'll make some more changes. First, I might go up to ISO 3200. Then I'll start to slow the shutter even further. I'll go as low as 1/4 of a second if I have a good spot to brace my camera. If I can get completely stable, like on a tabletop, I might drop the shutter speed even further. But you have to keep in mind, at those speeds, if you're photographing a subject with any movement at all, they will appear blurred. If I'm still not at the exposure I want, or I need a slightly faster shutter speed to keep the subject from blurring, say 1/30th of a second, I might boost the ISO all the way up to 12,800 or higher just to get the shot, even though at that ISO the image will not be very sharp and probably also pretty grainy. So get out this weekend and try shooting in some situations where you'd normally think, this is way too dark. Use hashtag #ZDPPhotoChallenge and I'll check out your photos and share them in my stories. Leave comments here if you need some more info. And don't forget to check the link in my bio to download my low light guide for free today. Thanks, and keep it real.